Give thanks to the Lord and call upon his name. Make known his deeds among the peoples. Please be seated. American statesman and publisher Benjamin Franklin wrote the following advice in his 1757 edition of the Poor Richard's Almanac. Diligence is the mother of good luck, and God gives all things to industry. Then plow deep while sluggards sleep, and you shall have corn to sell and to keep. Franklin's humorous, yet insightful bits of wisdom profoundly shaped the growing English colonies that would one day become the United States of America. These pithy proverbs would form the backbone of what we would today describe as the American dream. Work hard, save your money, and then spend your money wisely so that you and your family may enjoy the fruits of your labor. There appears to be an obvious justice at work here. Those who work hard get something in return. Those who work harder get more than those who work less. This simple formula for the American dream appears to be shared by those early morning laborers in our gospel lesson this morning. But Jesus' parable story highlights a very different form of justice. Jesus presents us with a justice of abundance, a justice of love, a justice full of God's grace. Like my son's calculus homework, Jesus' formula appears to be more complicated for us to imagine. Several years ago, I accepted a job promotion that made it necessary for my family to move from our familiar home in New England to the unknown suburbs of Chicago. Now, after careful research and thoughtful consideration, we finally moved to a town that is well-known, well-respected, and highly rated for its schools and services. Now, this town is highly rated because many industrious and successful people live there, and they have worked very hard to achieve this success. Shortly after moving to the town, an interesting experience revealed the diligence of those in our new community. Carol and I were planning to attend our first parade, and we had heard in advance of the popularity of these parades. Arrive early, we were cautioned by many of our new friends. In fact, the night before the parade, we happened to be driving through the downtown area and were surprised to see that people had already set out lawn chairs along the street some 12 hours in advance. Well, the next morning we arrived about 30 minutes prior to the start of the parade, hoping to find some spare patch of land to claim as our own. We slowly made our way down Main Street and finally found an acceptable spot in front of one of the Main Street shops. Now, we would need to stand throughout the parade, but the sidewalk was wide enough to accommodate several rows of people, of which we formed the back row. The parade began to pass by with Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and marching bands and antique cars. And as the various groups marched by, Carol and I moved left and then we moved right to peer through the crowd. And after several minutes of moving left and moving right, I became more aware of the people in front of me, the comfort of their seats, the ease of their unobstructed view, the apparent value of their early morning arrival on Main Street. And just at that moment, the rain began to fall. Even though the weather forecast had predicted rain, even though the charcoal clouds above had threatened rain, and even though we were in Chicago in the springtime, after all, the rain was unwanted, unexpected, and unfair for the good order and discipline of this neatly arranged crowd. Unwanted, unexpected, and unfair. Words that likely resonate with the early morning vineyard laborers in our gospel lesson this morning. The early morning laborers are industrious folks and are at the right place at the right time for the early arrival of the landowner. For their hard work of proper planning, these early morning laborers start their grueling day at 6 a.m. and are promised a full day's pay, 1 denarii. The laborers who start at 9 noonday and at 3 p.m. are offered compensation as well, but they are promised to earn only whatever is right. The last group work for a mere hour, and no talk of compensation is made to these laborers. As the day in the vineyard draws to a close, the laborers are gathered for their pay, beginning with the last and then going to the first. As the last laborers and those who have joined throughout the day receive their full day's pay, we might imagine the building excitement of the laborers who have been hired first. Surely they will receive more than these last ones. And we should remember at this point that Matthew's gospel account presents us with many lessons where faithful and industrious servants are richly rewarded. The parable continues. Now when the first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received the usual daily wage. And when they received it, they grumbled against the landowner. Jesus' story begins to turn upside down, as a parable should. This once happy story of laborers receiving much-needed daily wages turns into a group of unhappy people grumbling against the landowner because they thought they would receive more. We here thought they would receive more in our text this morning. Some translations say they supposed, or more strongly, they expected to receive more. The Greek word nomizo can be translated to mean any of these English words and means to assume or suppose a certain outcome is likely based on the customs of the day. Like us, the laborers develop their thoughts, their expectations from their surrounding society. Their simple formula of justice based on hard work is a justice that certainly can be fair, but their understanding is also a justice that can be limiting and narrow in its scope. Jesus tells this parable from his understanding of the abundance and gracious love of his Father. Jesus reveals that God's justice knows no limits and is anything but narrow in scope. So the last will be first and the first will be last. Stanley Hauerwas, in his commentary on this parable, addresses this interesting process of paying the laborers at the end of the day. Hauerwas writes, if the landowner had begun paying those hired first, they would not have known that all were being paid at the same rate. God's grace is the grace of truth, refusing to hide from us the character of our envy of those whom we think undeserving. Hauerwas' insight of God's grace of truth reveals a critical element of Jesus' parable story. The truth is revealed as the early morning laborers see that everyone is paid the same. The truth is revealed as the landowner faithfully responds to their grumbling, speaking to one laborer from the crowd. Friend, I am doing you no wrong. The truth is revealed as the simple justice of the hard work of the vineyard is transformed by the grace-filled justice of abundance. God's grace of truth. God's grace of truth and love is extended to each of us every day as we live through the tension between the justice of hard work and the justice of abundant love. God is with us as we struggle between the sometimes narrow justice of the American dream and the wide open justice of the heavenly dream. Unwanted, unexpected, and unfair. The rain continued to fall on the parade that morning, but Carol and I never did get wet. Although we were in the last row of parade spectators, we happened to be in the first row of people covered by the storefront awning above. The parade continued, the rain continued, and all the early morning parade watchers got out of their seats and took their positions behind us, under the cover of the awning. Now before the rain fell, every person sat or stood in accordance to their first come, first served position. The crowd was certainly orderly, but stranger did not talk to stranger. However, after the chaotic rain was released on this well-ordered crowd, conversations spilled across social boundaries. Laughter filled the air as folding chairs dripped with rainwater, and strangers took turns standing in the front row as their children proudly marched down the street. The simple justice of hard work had been transformed by the grace-filled justice of abundance that rainy morning. Grant us, Lord, not to be anxious about earthly things, but to love things heavenly. And even now, while we are placed among things that are passing away, to hold fast to those that shall endure. Amen.